The audience at The Late Show with Stephen Colbert had no idea what was about to unfold when Prince Harry walked onto the stage that evening. There was an electrifying buzz in the room, a mix of royal intrigue and late-night comedy anticipation. Prince Harry, promoting his latest memoir and public mental health initiative, had already done a string of interviews in the US, but this one felt different. Colbert welcomed him with his characteristic charm and wit, smiling as they shook hands and sat down for what was supposed to be a thoughtful, yet light-hearted conversation. They laughed about American tea customs versus British tea etiquette, joked about Harry's adjustment to life in California, and lightly touched on family dynamics with some nuance. But within a few short minutes, a tension began to rise. Tension the audience could feel, even if they couldn't immediately identify the source. Asterisk, as the conversation turned to the royal institution and Harry's recent revelations in the press, Colbert's tone subtly shifted. He pushed harder on some of Harry's past statements, questioning the intent behind airing such private family matters publicly. Some people feel, Colbert said, that you've traded tradition for tabloids. Do you see any irony in that? Harry paused. I think there's a difference between telling your story and leaking someone else's. He responded, measured but clearly agitated. Colbert, sensing the discomfort but pressing on, added, but isn't it true that by stepping back from royalty, you've also stepped into the role of public narrator of a very private institution? The audience was hushed, watching two powerful figures square off in a battle of perspectives. Harry's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in clear defiance. If I don't speak, others will keep speaking for me, he replied sharply. Colbert tried to diffuse the rising tension with humor, throwing in a quip about Buckingham Palace having better PR than Netflix. It got a few laughs, but Harry didn't bite. Instead, he leaned back and crossed his arms. There was an edge in his voice that made even Colbert pause. At that point, the friendly banter was gone. What followed felt less like a late-night interview and more like a philosophical standoff. Colbert asked if Harry ever considered the long-term consequences of exposing rifts in the royal family. But most don't do it with 1,000 cameras pointed at them. The difference is I didn't ask. For the cameras, I was born into them. Colbert raised an eyebrow. And yet here you are on a late-night stage, cameras and all. The jab was subtle but sharp, and the audience could feel that the discussion was skating on very thin ice. Prince. Harry straightened in his seat, his voice lowering but becoming even more firm. Don't confuse visibility with vulnerability, he said. Speaking out doesn't mean I'm exploiting my story. It means I'm owning it. Colbert, clearly taken aback, nodded slowly but replied, but is there a point where the message becomes more about personal redemption than public responsibility? That was the moment the air completely shifted. Harry, visibly exasperated, uncrossed his arms and placed his hands on the table between them. Do you invite people on this show to help tell their stories, or to question whether they deserve to tell them? The room went silent. Then Colbert chuckled, a deflective gesture, and said, I just ask questions. It's kind of my job. Harry didn't smile. Maybe you should ask yourself why you're asking them this way. Some began murmuring awkwardly, uncertain of how to react. Colbert leaned forward, adopting a more serious tone. Look, I respect your journey and I respect you being here. But if you expect to only be celebrated and not questioned, then maybe this isn't the right platform. Harry didn't flinch. Then maybe you invited the wrong guest. The tension was now undeniable, and for the first time in the interview, it seemed there was no way to recover. Colbert stood from his chair, visibly frustrated. Okay, I think that's enough, he said, waving his hand toward the stage entrance. We'll take a break. Prince Harry didn't move at first, then slowly rose from his seat. He glanced toward the audience, then back at Colbert. Thanks for the conversation, he said coolly, and walked off the set. The audience was stunned. Some clapped out of confusion. Others sat in silence. The show cut to commercial abruptly. No follow-up commentary, no jokes, no attempt to spin it. Just a hard break. When the show returned, Colbert was back in his chair, visibly composed, but clearly rattled. Well, that was something, he began. Try to have an honest conversation, and sometimes people take it personally. That's life. He didn't elaborate, nor did he apologize. The rest of the show went on, but the atmosphere was flat. The moment had already escaped. The Studio 8 was being clipped, posted, and debated online in real time. Social media was ablaze with reactions. Some viewers sided with Colbert, praising his journalistic courage. But a larger portion seemed to rally behind Harry, accusing the host of ambushing a guest under the guise of comedy. This wasn't an interview, one tweet read. It was an interrogation. Another wrote, Harry deserves better than late-night sarcasm and shallow jabs. Asterisk within an hour, hashtags like hashtag Harry vs Colbert, hashtag Stand with Harry, and hashtag Late Show Clash were trending. But those who watched the full segment knew it wasn't a storm. It was a slow, calculated exit. Analysts began discussing whether late-night shows had become hostile. Environments for public figures seeking serious discourse. Commentators on both sides weighed in, with some accusing Colbert of crossing the line from satire into disrespect, and others suggesting Harry was too sensitive for public criticism. The incident sparked a much deeper discussion about celebrity vulnerability, media responsibility, and the blurry line between entertainment and exploitation. Late-night shows, once safe havens for clever laughs and light promotion, now seemed more like pressure chambers for reputation. Asterisk. Prince Harry released a statement the following morning through his spokesperson. While Prince Harry values open dialogue, he believes respect should remain at the core of any public conversation. He wishes the Late Show team well. It was dignified, calm, and free from animosity. Colbert, meanwhile, made a short, dismissive comment on his next episode. Some guests are easier than others. What can I say? The remark did little to quiet the controversy. It only poured fuel on the fire for those who felt Harry had been treated unfairly. Talk shows across the country debated what had happened, with some replaying the moment and pausing at key expressions, analyzing tone and body language like it was a courtroom deposition. It had become the week's most talked about cultural moment, a clash between candor and comedy, royalty and rebellion, privacy and publicity. Asterisk, in the days that followed, public opinion shifted firmly toward Harry's side. Many viewers praised his poise, especially in the face of subtle provocation. Are often forced to mask their emotions under the expectation of humor or taking a joke. Usual empathy seemed absent during the interview. Think pieces, reaction videos, and podcasts dissected every word. Comparing it to previous guest interviews and identifying a trend of hostility masked as wit, the discussion went beyond Harry and Colbert. It became about the evolving role of public interviews and whether traditional media outlets were equipped to handle vulnerable storytelling in the digital age. More importantly, always judged for how he navigates both. Asterisk, back in Montecito, Harry kept quiet after the statement, choosing not to escalate the matter. Some interpreted her calm demeanor as a quiet sign of support. Meanwhile, late-night television continued its usual rhythm, but with a subtle undercurrent of change. Producers began revising their guest prep protocols. Audiences began watching more critically, noting which interviews felt genuine and which felt like spectacles in disguise. A former Late Show staffer anonymously commented to a blog, "That moment with Harry changed things internally. A new sensitivity now, not censorship, just awareness." Even rival hosts like Jimmy Fallon and Seth Meyers subtly referenced the clash, hinting at a shared understanding that things had gone too far. Asterisk, ultimately, the night Harry walked off. The Late Show wasn't just a celebrity drama, it was a turning point. It exposed the limits of mockery and the cost of truth-telling on a public stage. In refusing to shrink under pressure or laugh off pain, Prince Harry sent a powerful message. Dignity doesn't need applause. It simply demands space. He didn't shout, slam doors, or make a scene. He stood his ground, spoke his truth, and left when he was no longer being heard. In a media landscape obsessed with noise, his quiet exit became the loudest statement of all.